So my side quest of making a period game ended up turning me from an economist to a gaming founder. The entrepreneurial journey is such an interesting beast. Literally, 1 minute, you can envision yourself standing at the New York Stock Exchange, pressing that IPO button. And then the next minute, you're like, I don't know if I'll make it in the next 6 months. If you're
Mm.
putting out, I am winning energy, it is literally on me to ignite that passion and to light that fire. Life is a game because it carries the same level of excitement, whether it's the next challenge or the next victory or the next loss.
Welcome to Life is the Game, hosted by yours truly, Alexandra Nicole Stone. Get ready to uncover the secrets to mastering your destiny, becoming the main character in your life, and embracing a life filled with meaning and joy. Ready? Let's play. Hello and welcome to Life is the Game. I'm your host, Alexandra Nicole Stone, and today we have Miriam Nasrat joining us. Miriam is a Forbes Next 1K Entrepreneur, Clinton Global honoree, TEDx speaker, winner of the Entrepreneur Elevator Pitch Show and Web Summit Qatar. Miriam Nasrat is a US based Pakistani entrepreneur with 11 years in purposeful video game sector and 15 years of experience in the edtech space working at the World Bank across 22 different countries. Miriam is the founder of Breshna.io, a tech platform that empowers users to create, share, and monetize their own purposeful video games with no code and at lightning speed. So think Canva for games. So that's really exciting. The platform has 180,000 registered game makers and 160,000 plus games published and 2 million game clicks. Miriam has raised 2.5 million in seed funding for Breshna from investors including Paris Hilton and Randy Zuckerberg. She also leads a gaming studio that creates low-cost mobile games for positive behavior change among the bottom billion. The team has created games for a wide range of development projects focusing on education, reproductive health, climate action, and social cohesion. Miriam is on a mission to empower the next 100 million people to tell their stories through video games. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining me, Miriam. You are an absolute powerhouse. Reading your bio here, I'm like, whoa. What else does she do? What doesn't she do?
You're so kind. Thank you so much, Alex. Thanks for having me. And I'm a big fan. So this is a mutual fan club, and I'm so excited to be here today.
What I really love about what you're doing with Breshna and then just like the whole point of sharing stories through video games, how do you apply gamification concepts to your life, right? And how do you kind of use games to enhance your life, whether that's via education, whether that's just like enhancing the spirit of play and fun in your life? I think that's really what Life is the Game is about. So I'm really excited to have you on and honestly for you to teach me.
I think it's so exciting, Alex, because like you said, I think games are such a powerful communication tool, and the impact that they have in our brains far transcends those virtual boundaries in which we play them. And yet it's almost tragic that we don't see games being mainstreamed for storytelling or purposes beyond entertainment. And that was kind of my mission, was to break the time, skills, and cost barriers behind making games, and to say anyone can make a video game. Like there's 1 billion video game players around the world, but almost only 200,000 people making games. And
Whoa.
that just, it doesn't track, right? When we talk about diversification of content, when we say, hey, what are the stories we're going to tell in video games? You cannot diversify content unless you democratize content creation. And to me, it's that, like, why don't we just open the doors, open the floodgates, and allow people to make their own video games? What TikTok did for video, what Canva did for design, we're doing for video games.
I think that's super important. And I think it all starts with a vision, right? And kind of getting more people onto that vision and sort of seeing through their lens and understanding that, oh my gosh, I can do this too. And I think there's sort of a wave happening now because of AI and because of social media, right? Where everyone's like, I want to do something that's me, right? I'm my own business, I'm my own brand. And I want to take these ideas that I have in my mind and bring them to life. So, what started to inspire you about video games? What game inspired you or kind of shifted the way that you looked at the world?
Yeah, so I think there's almost like two aspects of it. Like, first, I grew up obsessively playing SimCity, where, I was just building my cities, and obviously it starts with Sims, but I think SimCity really, and any of these city planning games I was really
Mm.
into. There was Caesar, there was SimCity. And I think one of the things I realized, so I mean, I played these games as a kid, and then fast forward while I'm doing my second master's degree. So I'm an economist by academic training, and my first master's in econ, my second master's in international development. And I was training to be an international development practitioner, a policymaker. And I think it was so interesting to me because there was this one classroom where my teacher and the student were having a dialogue between what will be the thing that changes the future of Kenya. Is it education or is it energy? And they just had a back and forth, and like the teacher's like, it's actually energy and infrastructure. The students like, no, it's education. And I was like, what if there was a SimCity like game where we could literally simulate the economy of Kenya and like do education interventions, and then kind of go back in time and then do energy interventions and almost see the impact, because have that simulative economy in front of us and see the impact. And I was like, this would be so cool if there was a Sim City for policymakers. Because I was learning about urban planning through Sim City without even knowing I was learning about urban planning. So I think that classroom, sitting in that classroom, I started and I was like, well, there have to be games for policymakers out there. And this was 11 years ago when kind of like games for good, purposeful gaming was just beginning. And that was
Mhm.
the rabbit hole that I went down on in that one classroom, and I never came out of it. So I think, games for good, games for policy, games for behavior change. SimCity was what started it.
When you were playing or when you were going to school, did you realize I've been passively learning city planning because I was playing SimCity? Did you just kind of come to those realization where this is so familiar and I don't know why? And then you're like, oh my gosh, it's because I spent, hundreds of hours building cities and Sims.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, when I started talking about policies, like even the idea of like don't put a hospital close to the sewage, the plant and everything. I think in SimCity you would get penalized for that, or like where you put the highway and everything. And I was like, man, this is exactly what we do in real life as policymakers, especially when it's urban planning. So I think it was almost the other way around. Like when I started seeing policy happen in real life, I'm like, life's a video game. Policy making is a video game, right? Like all of this is just a big, complicated video game. So yeah, that's when I made the dots and the connections. And I was like, the reason I'm so good at it is because I played SimCity. Like that's my qualification.
I love that. I've been having like similar discoveries. I was learning history from Assassin's Creed like just the other month. I was playing Odyssey and then I was in Athens and I was like, why is this space so familiar? I've actually been transported through time and I know what this location looks like because of a video game. And I actually knew the history. Like I knew what was happening at the time and I was just passively learning. And it's all because you're really invested in the story, right? You're just so invested in that story and you're learning so much through the process.
100%. Super agreed. They're just so powerful.
So, Miriam, you're just such a powerhouse. Tell me a little bit about your journey, the side quests you got on to sort of level up and become this character that you are today.
Yeah, Alex, it's so crazy, right? So when I was in third grade, my dad put out three logos in front of me, and he was like, "You're gonna go to this business school in Pakistan," which was Lum. So I'm like born and raised in Pakistan. Then you're gonna go to the London School of Economics, and then you're gonna go work at the World Bank. So I'm in third grade. I don't know what any of these things are, but the path like has been charted out, and I'm like, all right, here I am. I've started my mission. Here I go. And I think what I realized while I was at the World Bank, and I ended up doing all three. So I went to the business school, I went to London School of Economics, got my degree there, threw another master's in there, and then also ended up at the World Bank. So, I mean, for all practical purposes, I had reached the gold standard of career. I was like, I'm living my dream, I'm living my dad's dream. This is the best thing that could happen. And then that class happened where I started going down this rabbit hole of SimCity for good, right? I was like, there have to be games around policymakers. And I dabbled and I Googled and I looked into that. And very quickly I realized, okay, there's the policymaker, like the training aspect of games. But what is even more powerful is what if these games could actually influence the projects themselves? So the behavior change for the people that I was working for, right? The organizations I was working with were part of health projects and financial literacy, climate change projects, and often they would like do all these multi-million dollar projects, and then the behavior change part of it would be, here's a brochure, now go change your behavior, right? It's like, it was like, here, now use this malaria medicine, or here, now use this mosquito net, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not how behavior change works. So I was like, maybe we can leverage video games. So one of the first games we created was a student project where we made a period game where you catch pads with a pair of undies and you're busting menstrual myths. So literally it was like a very simple game. I got together with my brother. I'm non-tech myself, but I called him up and I was like, "Hey, like, look, I mean, for around $1,000, can we have this game made?" And he's like, "Let me see what I can do. Let me make some calls, pull in some favors." And we just made this game. Like, it was a student project game, which was a period game. And it was just so interesting because it got a lot of traction. I ended up presenting on stage with President Clinton, UN, USAID, all of these other organizations kind of took notice, and they wanted to make the game in different languages and all of that. And I realized that there's a huge hunger in the kind of social good NGO international development world for these bite-sized video games, these simple video games that can be played on these low-end Android phones around the world in the emerging economies. And that's where we then, I was like, there's something here. And that's when we set up our own gaming studio, and we started making climate action games, financial literacy games, animal welfare, COVID-19, reproductive health. We just made these bite-sized video games that we would develop for these projects, and we did that for 8 years until COVID hit, and we realized that the demand was so big, we as a gaming studio couldn't make these games fast enough. There were just so many people asking for these games, and there was still a cost barrier. As a service based studio, we were like, well, it's not going to be $500,000, but it's still going to be like $20,000 or $50,000 for us to make this game for you. And that still can be prohibitive. The time was very long. So then I was like, okay, we've realized the power of games for social impact. But now let's break the time, skills, and cost barriers behind making these games. Because we're making the same kinds of games, whether you're catching pads or you're catching plastic bottles or you're catching financial literacy concepts, the gameplay is the same. And that's where I was like, you know what? We need a Canva for video games. We
Yes.
need to remove ourselves from the equations. We need to empower people. And that was the birth of Breshna. So my side quest of making a period game ended up turning me from an economist to a gaming founder.
I think you have like just a really great journey there because I think what a lot of people experience is that really in the early stages of our life, we're sort of set with this very linear path to growth. We're like, you have to do X, you have to do Y, you have to do Z, exactly what your dad did. You're like, this is the mission, this is the objective, like, this is the game that you're playing. At that time, you're not thinking there's other options for yourself. So you just went through that path. But it's through going through that experience that sort of triggered all of these sort of external inspirations, right? If you didn't go down that path, you would have never been in the position to make the connections between all of these social change and policy making to video games. And I think there's something else where it's not novelty because you've been doing this for 8 years and you're like, maybe a lot of naysayers are like, okay, people are investing in a video game, bite-sized video game because there's a novelty component to it. But you're like, there's actual learning. And what is some of the most like memorable campaigns that you've ran with these bite-sized video games that you're like, oh my gosh, this has the power to change the world?
Yeah, 100%. So I think two areas, I should say three areas, right? So it's like, I feel like when we started, the idea of a period game was something that was so shocking, right? Because one, what does a period game even look like? Like, some people
Yeah.
were disgusted, some people were horrified, guys, but there is a men in menstruation. So we were like, this is a game for everyone. Like, guys, women, like kids, whatever, like, play this game because there are 219 nicknames for the word period. Imagine the amount of creativity that goes into cementing the stigma where you can't say the word period. And there are real people dying every single month because they can't even sleep in their own houses because of the menstrual stigma. So I think what I actually realized was that games become a very interesting tool for almost taking these very complex, very serious, very heavy topics and making them fun and bite-sized and icebreaker, almost non-serious, right? And everything. So
Hmm.
it's like actually I find the serious gaming term like an oxymoron, because gaming
Hmm.
isn't serious, but then they do
Yes.
bring like that learning aspect into it. So it was really interesting to me because it wasn't the fact that people were catching pads with a pair of undies. It was just they were so engaged in the element of I want to catch it, right? And all of a sudden, like, slowly those stigmas begin to break, and then you catch these keys, and then the keys are used to unlock these doors that bust the menstrual myths. So all of a sudden they're on this mission now to bust all of these menstrual myths that they themselves believe. So it was just something really interesting that we kind of saw. What really happened, Alex, was when we launched Breshna, the idea that education, so the two use cases we saw, the first one was education. So what we did on Breshna was, if you're a math teacher and you want to make a Super Mario game where you're catching even numbers and dodging odd numbers, or you want to make a jigsaw puzzle game, or you want to make your own Wordle game, you do that. You can do it in any language. You can upload your own custom avatars. Your kid made it, like your student made a drawing. You take a picture of that drawing, you turn it into the background of the game, right? So the customization was endless. You can do your own avatars, your own collectibles as simple as JPEGs. That all of a sudden we saw, for instance, in Saudi, we all of a sudden saw Saudi became the third largest country without spending a single dollar in marketing, because teachers started making Arabic video games for science and math learning.
Hmm.
And when I spoke with teachers, they said, hey, usually with games, it's like the cart leading the donkey, because what happens is we go on the app store, we find a game, and then we have to retrofit our lesson plan to the game. They're
Hmm.
like, what you've done is you've put us in the driving seat, where now I have my content. If I'm teaching multiples of nine, I can go and make a game on multiples of nine. I don't now have to do multiples of 12, because that's the only game that exists, right? So,
Right.
and they're like, I don't have to scour the app store for 200 games to find the one that fits. And then the best part is they're like, I can make a student project. Today, like 40 of my kids can make their own games, and then they challenge each other. So all of a sudden, they call it the Kahoot on steroids, but we put the students and the teachers in the driving seat. And that's why we have 180,000 video games that have been created by 130,000 active game makers that have more than 2 million gameplays with a cost of acquisition of less than $1. And education has just been such a huge use case where teachers are just making these bite-sized game. It's a simple URL link. They send it on WhatsApp. Voila, you have your own quiz, your own homework, all of that stuff. And then I'll very quickly end with a use case that is a recent use case that has just blown my mind, and I'm really excited about this one, is bite-sized branded video games. So I'll give
Hmm.
you an example. I went to the farmers market the other day and I met this girl who makes really, really delicious cinnamon buns. And so what I did was I was like, look, I love what you do. I'm going to make you a free video game. And she's like, you're crazy, but okay, here's my email. Do you with everything. And I went back and I went to her website. I asked her for permission to use her IP and everything. Went to her website, picked up a background that had her face in it, her logo in it, and then all you were doing was there was a bun that's like flying around catching all of the different cinnamon buns from her website, so like product placement and everything. And then it was like, if you get a score of 100, you could get a 5% off if she agreed to it.
Hmm.
And that kind of bite-sized branded video games that you can put at a QR code on your website and everything, that kind of empowering the small business, where you have on one side Walmart and Sour Patch Candy in Roblox, but not everyone has that kind of budget. Empowering those small businesses to be able to make their own bite-sized branded marketing video games has been something that's just been really powerful.
I love that. I'm a marketer by trade, so I think it's really fun to sort of break the patterns that we have with existing marketing and changing kind of how we experience the brands. When you were building Breshna, were you studying gamification? Where you're like, what is the framework or what is like the baseline for these games? Like, what components do they require for them to be memorable, for them to be catchy, and for people to enjoy them?
So Alex, I think I learned by doing. I mean,
Hmm.
for us, like a lot of it, and actually I was talking, I made a post today on LinkedIn about this. I think naivety and a little bit of ignorance in the industry that you're operating in can almost be a superpower,
Yeah.
because I feel like coming at this by being an economist, by not being a hardcore gamer, by not, like, I mean, I will spend more hours than I care to admit on puzzle games and brain games,
Mhm.
but I will not sit for 7 hours playing World of Warcraft. Like, that's not the kind of gamer I am. So
Yes.
I've always actually felt a certain level of imposter syndrome, not in terms of lack of confidence, but that I do not belong to the industry in the way that there's a lot of like hardcore gamers. And the most pushback I've gotten has been from the gaming industry. These
Mm.
games are not serious enough, they're not fun enough, they're not this, they're not that. And if you look at it, casual gaming is one of the fastest growing genres of games. Our games have anything from, like, I mean, some of these games have 100,000 plays within the span of 10 days. So, that idea that, it's like whether it's fun or not, I believe in, like, rather than spending time in the theory of it, I just went and like tested it out. And I think that I don't have any formal training in game development or game design, but I have spent at this point 11 years in this space where, I mean, you start to create those systems, you start to then learn. I mean, obviously, I consume a lot of that knowledge of frameworks and what the difference between gamification and actual games, what makes a game fun, where's that edutainment trade off, like, when is it too much learning, too much fun, all of that stuff. And the theory of change of like mapping from game to actual real life impact. But I would say one of my strengths has been that I didn't start with the theory, because that's where a lot of limiting beliefs kind of start to
Yes.
simmer and nurture, right? Where you're like, but that's not what the theory says or something, and then you just go try it out and then you tweak along the way, and maybe the theory is absolutely right, but you find your way and you find a solution around it rather than never trying. Because had we never started, we wouldn't have known. Like, marketing use case was such an accidental use case. I would not have thought of that on day one.
Yeah. I'm connecting so much with what you're saying because I grew up gaming more like regular video games, role playing games. But to me, this, I don't play video games at that degree now. And it's kind of funny because Life is the Game is really about taking lessons from video games and applying them to your real life. But it's all been sort of an exploration. And I'm finding myself being more of a researcher. Now I'm kind of looking for those patterns, right? Like as I'm moving through life, I'm like looking, how do I connect everyday instances to games? How can we learn from games? Where do they overlap, right? It's kind of becomes more fun and then you kind of start playing the game, right? Because you're becoming the researcher. And you're like, how do these dots connect? How do we make this more engaging? How do we make this more fun? Then it doesn't become like this is for this audience. The audience is to be discovered, right? Like you're just going to keep on putting out the best quality content, right? The best quality product out there. And then your audience will find you. I know that's kind of like backwards from a lot of conventional marketing, but it's liberating, like you were saying.
And I think games, looking at life as a game, is such a liberating perspective on its own, right? Of being like, that's okay. Like, I mean, there are side quests and this will be challenges. And at the end of every challenge, there is a boss. And this is just the boss at this challenge and everything. I talk about this, especially for entrepreneurship, so much because often with my friends who are non founders, they're like, well, you built your product and you have a team and you raise money. So now you're done. And I'm like, actually, entrepreneurship is like every time, every milestone, there's a new boss at the end of the level. Because first it was like, do you have an idea? Can you build it? Do you have a team? Will someone finance it? Will someone use it? Will someone pay for it? So all of these stages are different levels with their own bosses. And honestly, if you don't get through that particular level, like, I may have raised all this money and I may have all this user growth, but if I don't generate revenue, I'm kind of like shit out of luck, right? That's game over. That's called game over. And then you start
Yeah.
from the very beginning. So I think knowing games and knowing that there's that progression and that continuous learning journey is something so liberating, but also so meaningful.
Segueing into that, like when was your aha moment where you realized, like, wait, I'm the main character and I'm the architect. I'm in control of my destiny and I'm in the driver's seat. And I'm sort of designing the game that's ahead of me, right? Like you finished school, you went through that motion. And when you were like, oh my gosh, wait, I'm the protagonist in this story, right? What was that for you?
Think it was, and I feel like COVID was probably a time where a lot of people went through that self discovery. Where I've seen so many people be like, I did a career shift during COVID. And I think it was when, realizing that we were sitting on literally a decade of experience building games for the purposeful sector. and realizing that the thing that was getting in the way was not that people didn't want it. There was a cost, time, and skills barriers. And I think my aha moment was, where is the Canva for video games? Because when I started looking into it, the low code game maker platforms like G Develop, Unreal Engine, even Buildbox, Scratch, Mod.io, amazing platforms, but they're all geared towards a game developer.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, you're a game developer, I will talk to you. And I was like, I don't want to talk to game developers. Like
Mm-hmm.
Canva was like, if you're a non-designer, I'm for you, right? And everything. Like TikTok is like, hey, you don't have to be a videographer to make videos on TikTok.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that was it. Like I was like, no, if anything, there's been so much gatekeeping in the game development world of like there is this gray mystical box of game development that you need decades of training for to then like, I mean, I get it, AAA games require decades of work and that's good, but there's an entire spectrum on this low end side of bite-sized games that can be created. Like no one's going to make a Netflix documentary on TikTok, but there is still casual snackable content being created on TikTok and consumed on TikTok every single day. And that for me was the aha moment. I was like, we need a Canva for video games. We need a TikTok for video games. And then I was like, no one's building it. So I'm gonna go build it. And then yeah, that was my main character energy where I was like, I have now emerged as a founder and I am going to found this thing and build the next decacorn.
What are some of the emotions that you're feeling now and that you've been feeling on this journey, like both good and bad? I know you're creating this amazing thing, but like what does it really mean to you and how do you feel about it all?
Alex, that's like such an interesting question. And I think founders probably resonate with this. Is the entrepreneurial journey is such an interesting beast that like literally 1 minute you can envision yourself standing at the New York Stock Exchange, pressing that IPO button. You're like, I will be a $10 billion company. That's what I've built. And then the next minute, you're like, I don't know if I'll make it in the next 6 months. It's such an interesting free fall that you're doing. And there's some level of delusional optimism that you just need because only 10% of startups make it, 90% of startups fail. But yet, every single founder believes that they're that 10%, right? So the level of delulu in the founders is just like, it's almost a necessary ingredient. And I think that every founder has those moments of up and down, but I think like that's the power of your community, and that's why I built in public on LinkedIn, because by putting it out there, by materializing it, by having your community around you, there's a sense of accountability but also a sense of progression and momentum. And often I tell myself, I'm like, zoom out, cumulative. You're an economist, you need to understand cumulative impact. Day by day it might mean like, oh, we had a setback or we had a win, but no one win or one setback is going to break or make this, right? It
Hmm.
has to be cumulative. If you can show cumulative progress, if you have one job which is show up every single day, if you can do that, there is an upward curve. So I think for me, it's just like the biggest emotion that I feel every single day is just this sense of responsibility, which is very manageable. Is like my I have one job, and that is to show up. And how I
Hmm.
show up and what I do in that day, I will not get through my all of my things to do list. There will be emails, there will be people mad at me because I didn't respond to them, and that's okay. I mean, I just sent my investor update out on September 1st. It was my mid-year investor update, but it went out on September 1st. It's like way past mid year, but that's totally fine. It's like, and if anything, it worked out because everyone was on summer vacation. They're back now and they get to respond to my investor update. So I think like things are going to be okay. But yeah, the emotion is just show up.
I love it. It's really defining your reason for playing, right? And I think that's what pushes you forward. And that's what a lot of people can learn is like in this life, if you really define your reason for playing, and even maybe you don't have your exact reason for playing, but you kind of have the data points. These are the sort of attributes that I would subscribe to the life that I want, or the person that I want to become, or the impact I want to have on the world. When you were telling me about the visualization you had of being in the stock exchange and hitting the IPO button, like visualization is such a key part of success. And your vision can change, people. Just wanted to let you, you know that the vision can change. But understanding and like having that vision, I always say it's like, think about your avatar, like the person that you want to become, the life that you want to have, and visualize like what that looks like. There's a like big distance between there where you're getting, right, and like where you started, right? You started out in a classroom having an idea and thinking, how can I take this farther, right? But every single step of that journey, every time you do something that aligns with that avatar, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're getting closer to that. You spoke on TEDx, right? You're getting funded. You have 2.5 million of investment. It's becoming real. It's that self-fulfilling prophecy. And that took, you said you started that journey 8 years ago, right?
11 now.
So
Yeah.
it takes time. And at each step of the journey, like the experience, the mission, the clarity you have around your goals is changing, it's evolving, it's crystallizing. So I think it's really important to share that development. And I'm really early in my entrepreneurial career, and I love what you're saying. You have to be delusionally confident in yourself, because if you don't have that, you're just not going to make it, because you're going to be like, well, there's thousands of other people, tens of thousands of other people already doing this. I don't stand a chance. But that's not going to help you win. Like, you have to be a little bit delusional. I love about what you said about the naivety about it all, because when we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, it's good to have like that frame of reference,
Yeah.
right? But we need to sort of also understand like what are our values? How do we want to design this game? How do we
Yeah.
want to build our product? How do we want to build our business? What does that look like to us? And having fun with it. Like you said, you're not going to let it stress you out that it took you maybe a couple months later, you submitted your investor report. You guys, if she is not stressing about it, you don't need to stress out that you didn't make a post yesterday or something like that. It's not that serious.
Yeah.
It'll get
Yeah.
done, because it's about that long term timeline, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I really do believe, Alex, what people rally behind is the energy you're putting out, right? If you're
Mm,
putting out, I am winning energy, I am showing up, I am consistent, like you're like, hey, Mariam, you're doing so well. I mean, it's because I have that. I'm like, I am doing so well. Like, I mean, it's almost like I will go self fulfilling. I am winning. I am doing so well. And the community around me knows that I'm doing so well. So it's almost like, I don't love that line of like fake it till you make it, but there is a certain level of like, just being able to show up with that energy. I always say this, like, I pitched to 219 investors to get 29 yeses for the $2.6 million we raised. That is almost like a 10%, a little bit over a 10% yes rate, right? I used to have days where I would have like 8 to 11 investor calls lined up back to back. And when you go into an investor call, you have half an hour. Their whole thing is they're going to come at it from the framework of this is not going to work. And then you have
mm,
to convince them the other way. So you go
yeah.
in and you're not going to convince everyone. So it's like, no, 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 punch. You're not the right person. Where's your technical co founder? I mean, you're not the right gender, the not the right color, not the right everything, right? You don't have the right background. What does an economist know about gaming? Blah, 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 blah. And I think I would get out of the call and be completely defeated, but then literally splash my face with water because the next phone call is a blank play page. Like if I carry that defeated energy to the next phone call, if they can't sense the fire in my belly, how are they going to be excited about it? It is literally on me to ignite that passion and to light that fire. So I think that often founders are like, well, this is just hard. And it is hard, but it's hard for every single founder. If you're going to win, you just need to show up with that winning energy every single day.
Do you think that's one of the ways you sort of adapted a game like mentality when you're going and approaching life challenges? And has working in this gaming world sort of changed your mentality? Like, oh my gosh, this is kind of like a game.
Yeah, and you know what? The game that I really resonate with Sonic and the Hedgehog, like they have their like all their different adventures, but every time Sonic shows up, his hair is perfect and it's all crisp and bright blue, and the world is bright blue, and he's out there like just catching all the coins, right? And everything. Like Sonic will get destroyed in the last stage, barely make it. Like the boss, like you barely make the boss level. And then the new stage starts and it just all like a new page, new energy. And I think that video games do that, right? You can press reset and show up with that. So in life, I feel like there's a certain value add to that refreshing new energy, whether it's every day, every phone call, every conversation, every email. You can press restart. Like you are in control. You get to decide when you want trickle over energy and when you want a winning energy.
I love that you say that because a lot of people don't take risks because they're terrified of failure. And, in games, we're like failing all the time, right? You have to fail to get better. That's part of the game design. Games are designed for you to fail, they're designed for you to get challenged, for you to lose. But that's what invests you. That's why you become invested in the game. And in real life, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose. I'm going to fail. Like, that's scary. I'm going to get rejected. Right. But in real life, we don't respawn. Right. Like, when you die, you die. But the cool thing about games and what allows us to be so courageous is that we respawn, we come back to life. But if we just look at like all of our failures and mistakes and rejections as maybe as like little deaths, but then every time we have a chance to face a new challenge, right? Or every time we make a new decision or take on a new opportunity or have a new conversation, like that's our
Yeah.
reset. That's when we get to start playing the game again. And the best part is that we have all the knowledge from those previous lives, from those previous times that we played the game with us when we go into those new challenges and those
Yeah.
new scenarios.
Yeah. No, it's so cool you say that, Alex, because the current version of you is the best prepared version. Like, that
Mhm.
is literally the most advanced avatar of you, right? It has all of the superpowers that it has gathered through your lessons learned, through all of that. So, like, you know exactly what move to do with this boss because you failed before. So, you know
Mhm.
exactly how to beat this particular boss. If an investor call goes south, I'm like, all right, let me just observe the whole thing and see what went south, and is it going wrong in a couple of investor calls, and that's a data point. And now I'm going to take that and turn it into a superpower. Like, I actually stopped sharing my deck during my
Mhm.
investor calls. I mean, a lot of
Mhm.
people present their pitch deck and then they're like, I'm going to walk you through, and can you see my slide, and now I'm going to press the next slide, and you
Mhm.
just end up not having a personal connection with the person. So I would then send my pitch deck beforehand and have a conversation and tell a story, and I started to see that work so much better. So that is a lesson I learned after failing, after trying something, and then you switch your strategy just like you do in games.
What does living life like a game mean to you personally?
You know, that crisp sonic hair and bright blue energy, like, that's for me. I feel like video games truly celebrate life. So it's like they're a celebration of life, they're a celebration of every aspect. Like, if you think about the backgrounds in video games, I often look at these deep, immersive, gorgeous, beautiful virtual worlds that have been created, and I think about it and I'm like, oh, that butterfly that they have, or that mountain that they have, some designer sat down and was like, I think this will add a certain aspect to it. Everything's very intentional, right?
Yes.
Similarly, and this is not like, I mean, meaning to get too spiritual or religious, but I do think that the way life has been designed for us is also very intentional. I mean, there are reasons that all of these things have been put into our lives, and I think if we can just try to celebrate that, like, when we're so in awe of the virtual world, why do we not have that same awe and excitement for our own lives? Like, why do we not step out and we're like, look at this new level I'm playing today? Like, where is that excitement? So I think for me, life is a game because it carries the same level of excitement, whether it's the next challenge or the next, you know, victory or the next loss, whatever that comes its way. I think it's just beautiful, and it's all planned and put there for you to enjoy and consume. And I think that's just really pretty.
That's so beautiful and it really resonates with me. And I think exactly what you said is for me, really role playing games is what inspired Life is the Game because it's those worlds. Because I haven't finished a lot of like video games, but for me, it's like being in those worlds, being in those spaces, having that sense of like wonder and exploration. I know that's not what it is for everybody, but for me, that's what like got me hooked to video games. I was like, holy moly, like this is so cool. I am being transported somewhere that maybe I can't attain in
Yeah,
this life, in this moment, in my present moment, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
if we take ourselves out of the game and put ourselves into life and we just look at this world that we live in as our open world, right? Like
Right.
we have all the resources we need to succeed, right? We just have to figure out how to tap in there. We have to find our allies. We have
Right.
to, maybe we need to team up. Maybe it's our network. We need to expand our network. We need to get some money. We need to travel more. Like this is the game.
This is it.
This is it. This is what it's all
Yeah.
about. This is the most exciting part of our existence, and it
Right.
you have control over it.
Like it shocks me that we can be complacent about life when we're so active in a video game. Like, I mean, in a video game, you're so in control, so active. Then why not have that same level of wonder and awe and not be complacent about life? Like, life is not happening to you, it's happening for you.
How do you think people can get to that point or tap into that sort of awakening of realizing that, like, oh my gosh, like this is the real game, like this is what life is all about, it's about this moment, right? How have you tapped into that, and like how can other people tap into that?
I mean, I don't know, Alex. Like, I feel like this is more of a life coach, like I mean, domain that we've entered. But I do think for myself, I always, I mean, it's almost like a morbid thought, but that's how I celebrate it. Is what will my end of game level, like when the credits roll, what are they going to be about, right? Like,
Hmm.
and whether you call it legacy or you call it like what people will celebrate and stuff like that. But I really do believe, like, like what's that story you're trying to tell? Because I mean, you are just going through it day by day. And I mean, did I want it to be like she was an awesome economist and she retired as maybe a vice president of the World Bank? That would be a great story too. But would I rather want it to be she empowered 100 million people so they could tell their stories through video games? That's the story I want. So I'm just going to go after that. So I think it's more of a, just like video games, they're like a crystal ball where you can look into the crystal ball and you can look at your future and then you can decide what you do today to alter that path, that future. I think the awakening is look into your crystal ball and see what it is. What's the story you want it to be in the next 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, and then go do it. So I think it's a little bit of, I am thrilled about life every single day and just like what it has to offer and then just take it as it goes.
Even if you're not a coach, that was a really like thoughtful and actionable response. So give yourself kudos for that. We have to visualize our future. We have to see what we want, and we have to be courageous enough to take action on what we see in the crystal ball. We have to take action on those visions. Otherwise, they're just going to be visions and they're going to be stuck in the crystal ball, and your life will never start looking like that. But it's all sort of baby steps.
It's showing up every day towards that crystal ball.
Do you have a vision for what gaming will look like in the future based off the work that you're doing and how you are in the industry? There's no wrong answer for this. I'm just curious based on what you do.
Very similarly to what we spoke about before, I think a lot of people are very excited about the high end of the spectrum.
Hmm.
So VR, AR, Roblox, like virtual metaverses, all of this, like, and that's awesome. That's the high end of technology. And I think all of that is going to be like, we will live in video games, life will be a video game, all of that stuff. The blurring boundaries between virtual and physical, I am absolutely, just like the rest of the industry, I'm absolutely excited about. But what I am truly excited about is kind of that lower end of the spectrum.
Mm.
Is when the tide rises, who all are we taking with us, right? Is it going to be the top 10% of gamers that have the most sophisticated hardware and all of the skills? And is that going to be where we rise? Or will this be a democratizing movement? And I think for me, when I grew up playing games, I didn't see the Pakistani girl. I often saw the New York City skyline and the yellow cab and the white dude, right? And everything.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, where is the Pakistani girl? Where is she wearing Pakistani clothes? Is she listening? Is the music like Pakistani? And then even within Pakistan, there's like so many regions. But I cannot tell the story. I can tell the story of one city in Pakistan, my lived experiences, but I cannot tell the story of the other city in Pakistan. So I truly believe the thing that I'm the most excited about is empowering every single person. If they want to wish a happy birthday, or they want to support their fruit stand and redefine marketing, or they want to engage with their student, or they want to make a video game about cancer. I don't care what your story is. I am just super excited that anyone is able to do that without any coding, without any design skills. and at lightning speed, which is what the word Breshna means. I just think it's really, really exciting to me that we can democratize content creation so we diversify the content we see.
I think there will be a real groundswell because of that. Because with the democratization of content, we're going to start seeing representation of all these subgroups of the world. And it's kind of like change never really happens until the people demand it, right? I don't even think it's necessarily the game industry's fault. It's just kind of the way it's been designed, right? Like it's been designed for the parts of society that have enough money to pay for those
Right?
really expensive consoles, that have money to pay for those games, and the storytellers for those games and their identity and experience, and that's what's being reflected in the games. Like I think now is just kind of like when women are starting to barely get represented in video games because people are realizing that I think that's 50% of the market. So as
Right.
these developments happen, as Breshna grows, as people are building bite-sized games, and I think what will happen is sort of this snowball effect that once the larger game industry see that, oh my gosh, like these are so many other demographics that are interested in gaming, and then there's so much more potential for gaming, and maybe we can
Right.
design passive learning in some of these more robust video games, right? And as technology advances, maybe the Canva for video games will be like one of those highly produced video games by like some of the major gaming studios. I am so on board with you on that mission. If you guys haven't used Breshna, you guys have to check it out. It's super cool. We'll have to make a video game for this
Yes.
episode.
Yes. We should make a video for this episode. That would be really cool.
Last but not least, are there any cheat codes that you want to share with the audience?
I think my biggest cheat code is that there's no cheat code. I think my biggest cheat code is don't go looking for cheat codes. It's like I feel like one of the things I've realized is this idea of fast money, overnight success, all of these things. It's like, oh, and then I did this one thing and then that changed and now I'm a millionaire. You need to have such a strong BS radar because all of these overnight successes have like a decade of work behind them. And then there's like that tip of the iceberg that we see,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, Breshna is 3 years old, but I've been at it. I've been like doing this stuff for 11 years. And then before that, I was in econ. And then before that, like there's a whole like back and back and back and back to these things. So I really do believe so many people get trapped in the, well, if I could just do this one thing, then I'll get there faster. And then they just keep trying cheat code after cheat code after cheat code, and it doesn't work. And then they get frustrated. But I actually think if you're just like, there's smart gameplay, I can approach this smartly, I can leverage all of the other lessons learned and all of that, but I don't have to find the shortcut because what if I can just make this path easier? What if I can just go through this journey with all of my toolkit, identify the new tools that I have for it? Like even in a video game, when you apply the cheat code, the path still stays the same. Like you still
Hmm.
have to go through it, but it just becomes easier to go through
Right.
it. So I think when we think of cheat codes in life, we just think it's like a very different route that you can take to a different destination. And there are some, but I just believe I don't go looking for cheat codes. I go looking for toolkits that can make
Hmm.
the destination easier.
I love that. We have to find our toolkits and then we're building our toolkits during our journey, right? Like when you set out on your journey, you have an idea. Like, but this thing is constantly evolving and you're evolving. There's just no way that through a period of time or 5 years or 3 years, that's going to be the same because you're constantly changing. The world around you is constantly changing. Your toolkit is changing. So,
Right.
like this vision you have or that success that you want to have is just kind of what sets you out on that journey. And then the rest is really kind of getting created as you're going on that journey, right? And the people you meet along the way and the influence they have on you and your story. So I love that you said that. Build your toolkit and know that your toolkit changes and it can evolve and be invested in the long run, right? Be invested in the long run.
Percent be invested in the long run. I love that.
Well, Miriam, tell people where they can find you so they can connect, get on Breshna, make a game, shout yourself out. Where can people chat with you and get on Breshna?
Absolutely. So Breshna.io, Breshna.io. That's Breshna. It's a website. You can make an account with an email, and it's completely free to use. So you can make your own video games at lightning speed. Often people take 15 minutes to make their first game, so that's fun. But I also build in public on LinkedIn, Miriam Nasrat. I am on LinkedIn. I share the good, bad, and the ugly of entrepreneur life and everything that's out there. But then, and all of our socials are at Breshna Game. So BRESHNAGAME, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all of those. But yeah, I really do believe that the community, if you're an educator that wants to make, you're a parent, you're a teacher, you're like, let me make a simple educational game, you're a startup, or you have a business that you're like, I really want to do cool marketing if I just had a quick game in my Instagram story. Or you're a doctor who's like, hey, I'm a dentist and I could have a dental hygiene game in my waiting room. All of those. Or you're just someone who's like, you know what, I just want to say I love you in a cool new way to my kid or my family or my friend. Breshna's for everyone, and it really is about empowering people to tell their stories through games.
Thank you so much for joining me, Miriam. I'm really excited for your journey and your progression and what Breshna will become. And I know that I really enjoyed this conversation, and I know that the audience will hopefully get inspired and tap into their main character energy and be able to share their stories using Breshna.
Thank you so much, Alex. This was just such a cool conversation. I love the whole framework of life as a game, and I am just so happy that you could make me a tiny part of your game right now. So I'm really, really excited, and I can't wait to get the audience feedback on this conversation. So thank you for that.
Okay.